G'day there. Welcome to the Closing Bell. I'm recording this on the 12th of May. And today I want to focus in on Dr. Copper because there is some selling around in those metals. I think as we see China really struggling to get going, growth worldwide slowing, we are starting to see a pretty marked effect in those commodities. Now, we all know the future-facing metal story. It's a long mega theme. Many people probably long that theme, wanting to capture the next decade or so of growth in demand. But what if we get an absolutely huge clear out in between? And that is what may be coming, but that could set up a huge opportunity down the track. So I want to set out the big picture in copper, give you a good sense of what we're looking at and how things may proceed. So looking at this chart of copper, it's a monthly chart going back to 1999. So we're looking at very long-term chart. We can really build up a picture of how copper moves. I'm going to use my way of looking at waves, my trends, and the corrections we see, into buy zones, the price action revisiting points of control. I want to take you through it all so that you can really get a sense of what goes on. So looking at this rally from 2001 up to 2007, look at that big, strong wave to the upside, intense rally. This is what can happen in those commodities. You get really strong trends and they can last for a long time as well. So this rally, you can see that the moving averages crossing there in 2003, rallying all the way through to 2008, before it came a cropper. And what I want you to look at is I've marked out the waves that we've seen over this whole time period. And I want to show you the regularity of how it's moved. So you can see on this wave, we've got that rally up into sort of 06 high. Now it's sold off over a period here. Where did it go back to? The point of control, that midpoint. It found support there, rallied again. You can see there's lots of work done in the sell zone, which ended up finding support and went off and had a slight false break of the high. And I want you to notice in copper the way it does that. If we're looking at the highs created at each level over the years, have a look at how price action has evolved after trying to break out to new highs. And this is where I talk about the false breaks that happen and that often, I think, happen far more often than the breakouts. And that's what gets everyone. That's what really confuses traders. People are getting bullish, or amateurs are, when you're breaking out to new highs. And often that can be the start of a move back to a point of control, a mean reversion event. So just carrying on though, you can see we've had that big wave higher. The failure, where does that failure go to? Goes down into the buy zone of that major wave. And that's where, I'm often looking for these opportunities, the big opportunities. And the reason I'm showing you this is because we're going to look at copper and where it's at now. And I want to give you a sense of what I think could be coming. So just seeing the prices turning around from that buy zone of the major wave. So you've got a big correction of that wave over, a year, which comes down into that buying support. Then you've got the U-turn from that major support, the monthly buy pivot, and then off it goes again to the next wave higher. And you can see, again, following those moving averages, if we're just looking at the moving averages on the monthly, it's been pretty damn good, hasn't it, over that time, giving you the sense of these large waves that have been occurring. And following along to that next wave, you can see we've got that huge run, the false break of the high. When it does that, where does it go? The midpoint, right, of that wave, the point of control. Then it rallies off and heads to the sell zone of that area. That's where the big selling pressure is. And down it goes again. And look, it finds a lot of support on this one around that point of control. But in the end, all of those mean reversion, and you can see mean reversion in so many ways. You can see how it's moving back to that 20-month moving average, back to the point of control, back to the 20-month moving average. It really gets wedged between the two before finally breaking. And you can see back to the point of control, then the final wave into that buy zone area. This is important for what is coming next, to follow this along and get this sense where you're building up a picture of how copper is moving. And then this wave out of here doesn't last as long, but it still moves in the same way, where we've got the long-term trend turns up. And then we get the correction. Where does the correction go to? Down into that buy zone, you can see there. And it's a similar story of the correction to the point of control, finding lots of support, back up into the sell zone where the selling pressure is, also back to the 20-month moving average, and then all that work done and the final wave into the buy zone, the U-turn, the monthly buy pivot, the long-term trend turns up, next wave to the upside. And here we are, the false break of that high. It's sold off. Where does it sell off to? The point of control. And then it rallies up where? To the sell zone. Also back to the 20-month moving average, where the resistance is. That's where the major resistance is. The long-term trend turned down. And this is where I'm going to now go up close to look at where we're at right now after all of that work, getting a sense of how this thing moves, and to say, right, where are we right now? What is the stage? And I tell you what, it's a pretty tricky one, because we've had that retest of the point of control. We've rallied up to the selling pressure to see if it's there. It was there. The trend is down, and breaking below that candle, that monthly candle, which is where it's at right now, that sees prices, if it does create the monthly sell pivot here, you've then got a pretty strong signal that it's gone back below the 10-month moving average within that long-term downtrend. The selling pressure's there. And even if it's going to do work, remember, the option is for it to do lots of work between the point of control and the 20-month for a while before a final sort of plunge. So it can either sort of move like that. And this is where I'd be saying, right, what is the long-term picture for copper? We know that we've got this 10, 20-year massive uplift in demand, future-facing metals. It's coming, but this is what we could be seeing in the meantime as growth slows. And the way that it develops and understanding how it develops is going to be very important for you down the track, to maybe not panic in the positions you're in, or get out and get ready for the huge opportunity that is coming down the track, but to build up that sense that where it's at right now is pretty dangerous, because even though it could do that slow movement, it could also do the quick movement, because the momentum is turning down now, proving that the selling pressure's there, and it's basically returning to the long-term downtrend. And when it does that, that's when you'll see what selling pressure is really there. And we know that a break below the point of control, usually you're looking at a target back to the buy zone. And we've seen for decades in copper over and over and over again, that it does usually revisit the buy zones before turning back up. So that's an overall view of how I see things looking here at the moment. It's looking pretty dangerous in copper for more downside. And look, it can take time. Often it will do that grinding, slow move, which is, revisiting the 20-month moving average over and over again as it descends. So basically sucking people in, taking them out if they're getting short, and looking like it's turning back up, but not, the long-term downtrend remaining. And, it can take time. You can see here, that was actually 2 years of trading before it finally cracked in that final wave. So it can always be drawn out, but also, what if it's going to do something like this? That's a potential too. So basically, while that monthly downtrend is in place, you're thinking there's resistance, strong resistance, until you finally move down into that area where there's strong enough buying pressure. And look, that could be, if we're saying a year of growth slowing, that is a pretty good model to be looking at and saying, well, where do I want to get long copper? It's going to be somewhere down there, isn't it? Down around that 225 to 275. So up at 368 at the moment. That's a big drop. And look, who knows how long it could take to get there. But just to be aware, we could be in for a bit of a rough ride in copper before that really long-term uptrend kicks in. And really, we are looking at something here. If you're thinking big picture, what can happen? Maybe this whole resistance zone, which has really held copper for the long term, let's say around this sort of $4.75, $5 region, you can see has really held copper all the way going back decades. What if we're looking at something like this? I don't think that would be a bad prognosis on what we're possibly going to see. So, short, medium term, watch out to the downside, and other metals as well. Everything's turning down in that metal space. Looks like we could be in for a clear out in that commodity space of people who are probably long, hoping for that really long-term uplift. They may be shaken out, and it'll be the smart money that's buying hammer and tongs down there, looking for that really long-term bull market to kick back in. All right, well, that's probably enough this week. Markets, S&P, ASX, dead, sitting in the middle of their range. I've told you all about that. We're waiting for a catalyst. Are the commercial real estate companies going to fall over? More banks to fall over? I'm thinking downside is the risk, but look, who knows when it's sitting in the middle of the range. So, all right, well, I'll come back with more next week.